For 10 years, the greatest army in the world has failed to break your city. They have thrown their best warriors against your walls, and your walls have held. They have starved you, bled you, and cursed your name. And then, one morning, you wake up to silence. You climb the ramparts, your heart pounding. The sprawling, noisy camp of the Achaean Greeks is gone. The beach is empty. The siege is over. It seems impossible, a dream, but then you see it. Standing alone on the sand, silhouetted against the dawn, is a gift. A colossal horse, fashioned from fir planks, so enormous it dwarfs the abandoned siege towers. It's the most famous trick in history. A punchline so obvious that we still say, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." And that's the real mystery. Not that the Greeks built it, but that the Trojans fell for it. Why would a people who had survived a decade of brutal, cunning warfare suddenly accept an object so suspicious, so absurd, that it feels like a child's fable? The official story says they were foolish, that they were blinded by victory, but that's too simple. The truth is far more unsettling. The Trojan horse shouldn't have worked. The fact that it did reveals a terrifying lesson, not about ancient gullibility, but about the anatomy of a perfect lie. Today, we aren't just looking at a wooden horse. We are opening a case file on the most successful psychological operation of the ancient world. To understand how this happened, you first have to understand the city of Troy in its final days. For 10 years, you haven't known a moment of peace. Imagine the psychological toll. Every sunrise brings the possibility of death. Every family has lost a son, a brother, a father. The food is running low. The world outside your walls is nothing but enemies. The siege isn't just a military reality. It's a constant, grinding weight on the soul of every person inside. Then, overnight, it's gone. The relief you would feel is not just joy. It's a tidal wave of emotion so powerful it could drown out anything, even reason. Hope, when you have been starved of it for so long, is not a gentle thing. It's a blinding, ferocious light. And in that light, the Greeks left their masterpiece. This wasn't some crude box on legs. The accounts describe an object of immense scale and strange beauty, dedicated to the goddess Athena. Think of it as a piece of shocking modern art left in the middle of a battlefield. It was unsettling, yes, but also captivating. It was a statement. But what was it saying? As the Trojans gathered on the beach, staring at this impossible thing, a debate erupted. And it's here that the official story begins to crumble. Because the Trojans were not universally foolish. Voices of sharp, cold reason rang out. A warrior named Capys warned that it was a trap, that they should either burn it or break it open to see what was inside. And then there was Laocoon, a priest of Poseidon. He strode forward, furious at the delusion he saw taking root. He hurled his spear into the horse's flank, and the hollow wood boomed, the sound of a vast, empty belly. And he spoke the most famous words of the entire epic, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bear gifts." Here it is. The moment the trap should have sprung, a high-ranking priest, a man of the gods, has explicitly identified the threat. He has physically demonstrated its suspicious nature. The case should be closed. Burn the horse, and Troy survives. So why didn't they listen? They didn't listen because the Greeks knew that to sell an impossible lie, you need more than a strange gift. You need a story, and you need a storyteller. As the Trojans argued, soldiers dragged a man from the reeds, a Greek left behind. His name was Sinon. He was shaking, crying, the perfect picture of a deserter. He told a story, and he told it brilliantly. He was, he claimed, a victim of the cruel Odysseus, who had framed him to be sacrificed to the gods for a safe voyage home. He had escaped, he sobbed, and hidden. His story played on the Trojans' existing hatred of Odysseus, making him instantly sympathetic. He established his credibility by confirming what they wanted to believe. The Greeks were gone for good. And then he moved to the horse. Why was it built? Sinon explained it was a sacred offering to the goddess Athena, to atone for the Greeks' desecration of her temple in Troy and to grant them safe passage across the sea. This was a critical move. He transformed the horse from a military object into a religious one. In the ancient world, offending a god was a far more terrifying prospect than facing a mortal army. An army can be defeated. The wrath of a goddess is eternal. But here is where the deception becomes a work of genius. A Trojan asks the obvious question: if it's an offering for their safe travels, why did they leave it here? And Sinon delivers the final masterful turn of the screw. He leans in and tells them the secret. The oracle, he says, told the Greeks that if the Trojans were to destroy the offering, Athena's full wrath would fall upon their city. However, the oracle also said that the horse was built deliberately, impossibly large, for a specific reason. It was built too large to ever fit through the gates of Troy. Why? Because if the Trojans were to somehow bring this sacred icon inside their own walls and consecrate it to Athena in their own temple, the goddess's favor would be so immense that it would not just protect Troy, but would grant the Trojans the power to one day sail to Greece and conquer their enemy's homeland. Do you see the brilliance? The horse was no longer a gift to the Trojans. It was a prize to be stolen from the Greeks. It was an opportunity to hijack divine power. Sinon didn't ask them to trust their enemies. He appealed to their piety, their pride, and their greed. He presented them with a choice: leave the horse outside and remain safe but stagnant, or take a calculated risk for ultimate divine-backed victory. He weaponized their faith against them. But still, there was the voice of Laocoon, the voice of reason. It's a trick. And then something happened that no one could have predicted and no one could ignore. As Laocoon stood on the shore, two monstrous sea serpents rose from the waves. They slithered onto the beach, their red eyes burning, and made straight for Laocoon and his two young sons. The creatures coiled around them, crushing them, biting them with venomous fangs. The Trojans watched in silent horror as the priest who had defied the sacred offering was silenced by a terrifying divine intervention. After their gruesome work was done, the serpents slithered up to the high city, disappearing into the temple of Athena herself. What would you think if you saw that? You would not see a random, tragic animal attack. You would see a sign, unmistakable and absolute. The gods themselves had passed judgment. Athena had protected her offering and struck down the man who blasphemed against it. Any doubt that remained was instantly erased. Sinon's story was now validated by divine proof. To argue against the horse now was not just foolish, it was suicidal. It was to spit in the face of the goddess who had just demonstrated her power so brutally. The debate was over. The Trojan horse should have failed. It was inspected. It was questioned. It was physically struck by a man who screamed that it was a trap. But it succeeded because it wasn't just a wooden horse. It was a complete intelligence operation that targeted the very core of its enemy's belief system. The Greeks understood that you don't break a city that has stood for 10 years with force alone. You break it by making its people break themselves. They didn't prey on Trojan stupidity. They preyed on their humanity, on their desperation for peace, their reverence for the gods, and their hope for a future better than the bloody past. They created a scenario where the most insane, irrational action, dragging a giant enemy idol into the heart of your city, became the only logical, pious, and divinely sanctioned choice. The Trojans didn't tear down their own walls out of foolishness. They did it as an act of faith. And so, they draped the horse in garlands. With cheers and hymns, they put rollers under its feet and dragged it through the breach they made in their own unbreakable walls. They celebrated into the night, a city drunk on relief and victory. And as they slept, the belly of the horse opened, and the end of Troy climbed out. The legacy of the Trojan horse is not a simple warning about trusting your enemies. It is a chilling reminder that the most powerful cages are the ones we build for ourselves from our own deepest convictions. Any belief, any hope, any faith, no matter how noble, can be studied and turned into a weapon by an enemy who understands you better than you understand yourself. The gates of Troy were not broken by a Greek army. They were unlocked from the inside by a story the Trojans were dying to believe.